Mark and I, as Darry said, sort of purchased a farm in 2016, and essentially we purchased it from nothing. So there's two things in our farm business it needs to be. It needs to be productive and it needs to be profitable. And trying to find the balance between production, profit, and then also long-term sustainability is a really, really big juggling act. This is all part of that process, and I guess I'll run through how we're trying to achieve it, I guess. Just a bit of a background, and this is probably fairly crucial for some of the data I'm going to go into. This is a photo or aerial photograph of our farm. I don't know how easy it is to see there, but a few things I'll point out. One is there's 40 hectares of heritage scrub here around the house. These blocks of plantation that you can see are actually pine plantations. All these things through here are sandhills, all these white bits on the map. Although our neighbours will say that we haven't got sandhills, they are certainly there. And essentially our business, we run a dual purpose merino flock. We do a small amount of cropping, probably started to increase that slightly in the past 12 months due to trying to reduce our carbon footprint, which sounds ridiculous when we're actually potentially, as long as we can maintain our soil carbon. So we're just playing around with a few things. Our pastures are mainly lucerne and veldt, hay production and lucerne seed as well. So we've got a mix of everything. We'd like to get back into some cattle, but we got out at the wrong time to try and get back in. So we destocked. The cattle were the easiest, most replaceable thing, and then by the time we went to buy back in, she just kept going through the roof. So that's a bit of background on the farm. Why are we even looking at this whole carbon neutrality? Well, I think by 2050 we're increasing the amount of people that we're feeding, as we heard from Adrian, but we're supposed to be net zero. So, it's a real balancing act, is trying to actually increase our feed production, even at a farm level, while actually trying to reach that neutral position. And it's a challenge that we're going to be continue to be faced with. Emma, I'm really disappointed that you're only giving me 10% on my pastures. I need 30, but we'll run through that later. Those saponins. I'll touch on that a bit later, but I guess, so we want to reduce our impact on the planet. Healthy soil is increased production, and you can't manage what you don't measure. So that's the scientist in me, that you just need to measure it, because once you can measure it, you know where you're at. And if you don't know where you're at, you've got no hope in trying to actually manage it. So if nothing else, just remember, you can't manage what you don't measure. The SBGAF calculator that I use to do all our benchmarking calculations, it's not actually that difficult to use. Shit in, shit out, but it's not that hard. So I challenge you to all go home and have a crack at it. But I guess the key thing is that as a farm business, we want to leave the place in a better condition than we found it. So, that sort of motivates us. But like I said, it still has to be profitable. Like, we just cannot afford to lose money and destock and we've still got to have productive pastures and make some money out of it. So just a bit of background on our carbon journey so far. In 2011, I did a carbon farming initiative training program, and fast forward to 2023, and I reckon we've come about this far, but our expectations that we need to be this far. So not a lot's changed in that time, although at the time the only approved methodology was for farming camels in remote areas. So that was the only methodology that the government had actually approved from a carbon farming perspective. So since 2016, when we bought the farm, I guess I've done a lot of research online, reading papers, podcasts, webinars, participated in regenerative ag, projects and workshops, and a lot of peer group learning. We've done some baseline soil carbon sampling, so I can tell you what our soil carbon stocks are on our farm. They range from 14 tonnes to the hectare of carbon stocks within 0 to 30 centimetres, right through to 27 tonnes of carbon stocks. And a lot of people that you'll hear, we are on sandy soils. A lot of people will be talking 40 or 50 tonnes. I don't think we've got the capacity to get there. I think 27 or 30 is going to see us out, and that's on our heavier ground. And I don't know that we're going to be able to, our lighter soils where 20 is going to max us. So there's not a huge scope for us to actually potentially increase that, even with some of we don't have clay. And so it's just I guess a continual challenge. So with the baseline the carbon benchmarking is the other thing that we've been doing. And like I said, the data's only as accurate as what you put in. But I guess the key thing is that we are trying to find a balance that suits our business. So, you could go to the whole extreme and go and chase every sort of rainbow to try and achieve this, but there's got to be a balance, and it's got to make money. So what is our footprint? And this has been touched on briefly. You'll notice a lot of people don't have many Scope 3 emissions, so the upstream and downstream emissions, but we run a dual-purpose merino flock where we buy in all our replacements. So at the moment, our Scope 3 emissions, so all of our replacement ewes that we buy in, we have to account for that under Scope 3. Now, I think that's wrong because the farmer I'm buying those from, he should be accounting for that, not me, but that's what it is. So that's so they compare our business to somebody else's. So I guess, you have I like to talk about a circle of influence and a circle of concern. It concerns me, but I can't influence it, so I'm just going to park it. And what we're going to do is scribble on the board, and we're going to start with 864 tonnes. So that's essentially what our on-farm scope is and what we can actually control. The other thing that we do have is plantings and vegetation, but interestingly enough, and I'll show that in a minute, that offsets it a bit. So we have got some stuff here that's giving us some offsets where we've got some sequestration, and we're balancing it at 1,510 of carbon dioxide equivalents across the farm. To give you an idea of this, our meat emissions intensity is 5.4 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of live weight. The normal in Australia is 6 to 10. And for wool, we're at 19.6, and I think 20 to 35 is the normal. So, we're lower than normal. We are punching above our weight, but reality is that we have most of our lambs turned off in 5 or 6 months. We can't get them off any quicker. So you sort of think about what can we do to try and reduce that further. Can we get our lambs up, get them gone, get them quicker, increasing fertility, trying to mark more lambs per ewe. All of those reproductive type traits are things that can help us to try and offset that. So that's what our footprint looks like. And I guess with regards to, and this is really, sorry guys, I don't think you'll be able to see this, but these are the key drivers, and essentially you can see on the is it working? On the chart, it's only working, there you go. This one here is our purchased livestock. So you can see this is our enteric methane on farm, and this is our purchased livestock. So that's actually a huge component to our whole farm. This is our pre-farm emissions, our fuel, our fertiliser and our manure. They hardly even rate. It's this enteric methane, which is exactly what Emma said. And funnily enough, when I put the next graph up in a minute, you'll see that our enteric methane's 80%. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Wouldn't read about it. So yeah, I guess that's probably where it sits. But like I said, it's only what you can. Another little fun fact, and Adrian, you'll like this one. I've done some maths when we talk about the big one of fuel. Everyone talks about fuel. So who knows what the current ACCU price on carbon is? $35.75. Very good. I'll find you something at afternoon tea time. So if we deliver a 52 kilo lamb to JBS, and you can see, I said in the previous one, it actually costs, our emissions, so 5.4 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of live weight. So if we deliver a 52 kilo lamb to JBS, to produce that lamb, it costs around about $10 in carbon dioxide equivalents, like in ACCUs, I guess. So $10 to produce that lamb of carbon. We send a B double load to JBS. We're about 140 or 50 Ks or 141 Ks from the abattoir. And it cost us $14.80 to send a B double load. So that's 2 cents a head in carbon. So I guess, you know, like you said, I thought you'd like that one, Adrian. Just the comparison is ridiculous. Like, fuel for us is just such a minute part of it. And so when you're looking at a livestock system versus a cropping system, you can see that the livestock farmers are always going to be way behind the eight ball. So how do we try and manage this? So, you know, in the quest for neutrality, that's where we want to try and get to. Maybe it's probably a pipe dream, but what can we try and do to manage it? So like I said, you know, we've got this massive pool, but there's 864 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents that we can actually look to control. And that's what we've really decided to focus on. The key drivers on our farm, like I said, 80% is enteric methane or is methane. There's 14% carbon dioxide and 6% is nitrous oxide, which is largely from fertiliser. The carbon dioxide is fuel, urea, and grid supplied power. So that's sort of how that looks. But yeah, it's interesting. The 80%, I think, across most livestock farms would be fairly consistent, or sheep farms anyway. Next one. So what are our key sequestration drivers? Sorry, can you hear me when I'm not holding it as close? It's okay? Sorry. So this is a bit of this is poured out the Flint Pro software. So this is actually a report that we had generated for the farm. And what it does is it shows our forest carbon stock over time. So it goes from 1988 through to 2018. So it's a 20-year period to actually track how we went. So you can see in 2006 there was a bit of a glitch. So that was obviously a really dry year. So whether we had some leaf fall on some of those areas, I'm not entirely sure. We weren't on the farm then. But ever since then, we've still had that gradual increase where it's continued to go up and rise slightly and continuing to rise. So, okay, we're increasing forest carbon stocks. Where's this coming from? Now, you can't see this at all, and that's terrible. What you are supposed to see, what I can see on my screen, is these are a few red areas, and you'll see they equate on this map to the heritage scrub. But what you can't see are there's some green areas, and those green areas that should show up on here are actually all these pine plantations. So our heritage scrub is essentially neutral. It's basically just, you know, sequester, or the carbon flux is deemed to be neutral. And it's all these pine plantations that are actually contributing towards that on the farm. Yeah, it's one of those things to try and get your head around. It's taken a long time. So how else do we try and manage this going forward? What opportunities have we got? Like I said, livestock management, we can increase our reproduction efficiencies, but we're actually tracking along okay at that. Turn off stock quicker at a higher live weight. Improve our grazing management. We can look at soil management and soil carbon and trying to sequester some more. And then we can look at revegetation or look at farm forestry and fast growing forest trees. So I guess there's some opportunities that exist within the business. I just thought I'd run a bit of a livestock scenario through. I'll sort of touch on each of them quickly. But a baseline, so we sort of said 5.4 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of live weight is what our current footprint is. If we were to actually, there's often a bit of a misconception like, oh, you apply fertiliser and it's worse. If we were to say, okay, well, we're going to apply 10 tonne of urea to try and grow more feed during that winter period and try and turn off a lamb that's 3 kilos heavier. So grow more feed, get a lamb out the door quicker. Even taking into account the fact that we've actually put out more fertiliser, we've actually decreased our emissions intensity because we've got that lamb off quicker. So, you know, often it's a misconception that, to reduce my carbon footprint or to decrease my whole profile, I need to reduce my inputs. But sometimes actually increasing your inputs can help you to reduce your overall intensity emissions. Does that make sense? I'm getting nods. Okay. So I thought I'd put that one up just to, I guess, prove the point that you're only dropping it really slightly, but you are actually potentially got the potential to decrease it through some of those practices and by increasing inputs. We've got soil carbon opportunities. So this is a paddock on our farm that we've grid mapped and done an organic carbon grid map across the place, with red being low organic carbon, back at 0.4 Walkley Black, through to the dark blue being 2. Now that 2 is actually, there's probably, there is a little bit more clay in that, or we'll call it clay very loosely. But I guess there's the potential on these areas that sort of are orange, sort of below 1, to either look at taking them out of the system because they're less productive, or alternatively looking to do some soil work. So we have done baseline sampling, and we have found on some of these sort of soils here, these really sandy soils, that by going through with a yeoman's plough with inclusion plates and actually trying to drop the soil organic matter through the profile, we've actually been able to increase our soil carbon stocks in the 0 to 30 centimetres by around about 6 tonnes, which is really, really promising because we don't actually have clay. So there is the potential to do that, but then how much diesel are you burning to try and achieve that? But diesel doesn't cost that much. So it's all a bit of an argy-bargy to try and work the whole process out. But I guess if we're looking to try and use it to offset this 864 tonnes over here, 1 tonne of soil carbon stock is equivalent to 3.67 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents because it's more stable in the soil. If we could increase that by 6 tonnes of carbon stocks in the soil over 100 hectares, over a 3-year period, we get 734 tonnes per year. So we'd nearly offset that for 3 years. But once we've used it for 3 years, then it's gone. So if you're increasing your soil organic carbon, you can increase it, and you can use that potentially, well, in my head, this is all in my head, by the way, this isn't actually science-based, but in my head, you can use that to offset or to try and get on-farm neutrality, not actually apply, like I don't want to sell this stuff. I can use that to offset it, but I can only use it for 3 years and then I've used it. It's gone. It's not gone, it's still there, but I've already counted it once. And so the thing to be really mindful of with soil organic carbon is that it's not something, I don't think it's something that you can count every single year, because even once you've used it, you're not able to continue to build it at that rate. So just be really mindful of that if you're looking at soils projects. And I probably should have said right at the start, we are doing this for our own benefit. We are doing this because, like's been mentioned, I think one day the bank's going to come looking for it. I think JBS are going to come looking for it. I don't think they're going to pay us 1 extra cent for our lambs, but if we haven't got it, I reckon they're going to give us a penalty. So I think that's where it's going to get to. As a farm business, we would never look at selling or entering into the actual market, because I think we're going to need every single amount that we can sequester. We're going to need it all for ourselves. And I think that's where we're going to end up. And I apologise because that should have actually been in my opening line. So that's the soil. We're going for time. So revegetation is the other, I guess, the third piece of the pie. So farm forestry plantings, we sort of estimate that we can get about 2.5 tonne of carbon dioxide equivalents per hectare per year over a 10-year period. We're on about 450 to 480 mil rainfall, and that's all been worked out on based on that sort of rainfall. And so what we're looking to do is actually take about 12.5 hectares of low productivity land over the next 2 to 3 years and plant that down to some farm forestry plantings, just to try and start that process of actually trying to start getting our balances in order a little bit better. I guess, what sort of needs further research, I touched on it before, scope 2 and 3 emissions, we've got 40% of our total emissions are from purchased livestock, and I don't think that's my responsibility. So I think, longer term, there's got to be some clarity around that. And the other thing that I think is really important is it's actually soil carbon cycling, not sequestration. So we've got sandy soils that can only hold so much, but we can grow feed if we graze it. If we don't graze it, we can't grow it. So the more we can grow and graze and grow and graze and grow and graze, the more carbon we're actually pulling in from the atmosphere. We're not necessarily storing it in the soil, but we're taking it out of the atmosphere. And I think that's a conversation that needs to probably be had, is more around that whole cycle as opposed to just sequestration. So, I guess we're sequestering it in our stock, but there's no accountability for that at this stage. So that's my thoughts anyway. Long term, I guess in the quest for neutrality, better book. If anyone's looking at entering into this, the more accurate your records are, the better. There's the potential that we can get our carbon off, exported off farm in products as a credit. Lucerne in the pasture mix. There's saponins in lucerne. There's evidence that if you feed lucerne hay, introduce it into a ration in a feedlot, that it will reduce methane emissions by up to 30%. I'm grazing lucerne pastures every day of the week. Give me 30%. So I guess, if that's got the potential to reduce it, then from our perspective, that actually really helps, and is going to help us to try and knock back closer. We want to maximise soil health, but that's for maximum production, increase stock turn-off times, and for so many other reasons that we want to increase our organic carbon, not just from a carbon perspective. So look at some farm forestry plantings, and again, the cycling, not just the sequestration. At the end of the day, it's a really fast-changing environment. The rules are changing constantly, and I think it's important to know where you're at. And, we want to know where we're at and setting goals within our business with what we think we can achieve in the short to medium term to try and get closer, so that if this ever actually comes in and there's a rule book thrown at you, that we're all a lot better prepared to handle it. And I can do a quick calculation on the board if I've got time. If I haven't, questions? I'm done, aren't I? Couple of minutes. All right. So I mentioned that we've got 864, sorry, I've got bits of paper everywhere here. So 864 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents is our current benchmark, or footprint, sorry. So we've got some sequestration that I mentioned, so some veg at the moment, those pine plantations. So that takes us off by 75 tonnes, so that reduces it by that. So that gets us back to 789. So I'm hoping that we're going to get 30% because we're growing lucerne, and we can reduce our methane, which is 720 tonnes, by 30%. This is my wish list of how I'm going to try and get there. I don't know that it's ever going to happen. So if we were able to do that, so if we could reduce our methane by 30% because of lucerne, that gets us to 216. So we're slowly winning. So we're back to 513. 573. My maths here. If we look at some forestry plantings and say we did 50 hectares, that's going to give us 120 minus 120. So we're back to 453. If we said, okay, we're going to do 100 hectares of soil over a sort of a 7-year period, because I'm 48 and by 55 I'd like to be semi-retired, so then it becomes the kids' problem. So I've got 7 years to work on it. So everything I'm walking to is 7 years. But so if we said, okay, we'll do that, and based on the fact that we can potentially get 6 tonnes of carbon dioxide, 6 tonnes of soil carbon stocks, that gives us 22.02 per hectare. So if we did 100 hectares over a 7-year period, that gives me about 314 a year. So that gets me back to 139. So I'm getting closer. And 139 in the current day and age is about $5,000 a year that I'd have to come out with cash out of my pocket to try and get there. But I still don't know how I'm going to get that last 139. I haven't quite got that yet, unless I look at going and doing more re-veg. So that's a potential. So when you're thinking about this, and if someone knocks on your door and says, hey, let's go and trade this carbon that you've got out in your paddocks, just be mindful that that's, I'm still trying to work out how I try and get my 140 tonne. But hopefully I'll get there. Done. Thanks.